Welcome to Samario. Today we will start a new series, Legends, Myth, and Lore. In this episode, I will be telling you about the No End House, abandoned by Disney, and harboring experiment. This story, related by a young man named David Williams, might seem on the surface to be a particularly scary account of one man's journey through a mysterious and challenging maze. As you'll soon learn, he may have been tested on a much darker, deeper level. It began when a troubled college buddy named Peter contacted David online after months of silence. Their conversation revolved over an old house at the edge of town, whose unseen owner issued a standing challenge to anyone willing to navigate the maze-like structure and find each of 9 rooms, after which they will apparently claim a $500 reward. Peter had once tried the test, but was unable to locate all 9 rooms. Also, he seemed to have been deeply traumatized by his visit to No End House, for reasons he wouldn't or couldn't explain. Peter had a reputation of drug use, so David dismissed his reaction as phenomena or delusion. But David still wanted to explore No End House for himself. On the off chance that the challenge and reward was gaining, as it turned out, the house did exist, exactly where Peter said it would be. And when David arrived, he felt there was something slightly off about it. Something he couldn't quite place. But once inside, he revealed to see that the old empty house was set up much like a Halloween maze, complete with seasonal decorations and a welcome sign in the foyer, indicating where to begin. Room 1, this way, it's red. 8 more following. Reach the end and you win. With that, David began his journey. The first 2 rooms were marked by numbers enchanted deeply to their corresponding doors. David got a laugh out of the rather cheesy Halloween decorations that adorned them. Fake spider webs, flopping plastic bats, and discount store frog machines, to the accompaniment of stock music and sound effects. But there was something unsettling about the 3rd room. No cheap decorations here. Instead, he found only a single chair, surprisingly illuminated by a dim lamp. The entire room was bathed in dense shadow. Fighting the uneasy feeling in his gut, David crossed the room and reached for the knob at the opposite door. But when it wouldn't open, looking for a clue to escape, he noticed the shadows in the room had changed, while his back was turned. Not just changed, they were gone. Even his own shadow could not be seen anymore. Suddenly overcame with panic, David ran for the door in an attempt to break through, and was shook when it gave way freely, causing him to tumble into the fourth room. There were no shadows here, only total complete darkness and silence. Even the light from the third room failed to penetrate the Abase as the door closed behind him, and he couldn't even hear the sound of his own panicking breathing. The silence was finally broken by a low, constant humming, which gradually increased in volume. And it was then that David began to sense a presence in the darkness. As the sound escalated to a loud, painful screech, he staggered through the room, fumbling desperately for an escape, and finally found it, turning a knob and hurriedly blinding into the fifth room, falling to the floor in a daze. As his eyes adjusted to the new light, David realized he was surrounded by trees. Not artificial, but the real thing. The room itself was enormous, with a high ceiling, no sign of the surrounding room walls, and he could hear the sounds of insects and birds all around him. This indoor forest seemed strangely present at first, until he could feel insects swarming around him, biting him painfully. But the most horrible thing about the sudden attack was the fact that he couldn't see the bugs at all. He could only feel them crawling, biting every inch of his exposed flesh. Suddenly, in pain and terror, David crawled forward, every agonizing inch like a mile, until finally he reached the door. As he grasped for the knob, his body reeling from shock and fatigue, he began to hear the humming again. This time it was coming from behind the door with the number 6 carved into it. The horrors of room 5 paled in comparison to what happened inside room 6. At first, he saw what looked like an exact copy of room 3. A single chair illuminated by a faint lamp. But there was a difference. There was no exit door, and when he turned to look back, the entrance door had vanished as well. He was trapped in silence, desperation. David clawed at the wall where the door, room 7, should have been, digging into the plaster until his fingers became raw and bloody. His nails split and torn, but there was something beyond but a solid rock. He was about to cry out in anguish when he heard the voice. "Are you alright?" The voice came from behind him. Instantly, he swore to find the source and came face to face with a strange little girl. She seemed inhumanly delicate, with long golden hair, pale skin, and glimmer blue eyes, clad in a soft, ankle-length white dress. But there was something else about her, something inside her. He claimed he could see another figure occupying the same space as the girl. Not human, but something far more horrifying. A beast, covered with thick black hair, with hooves for feet, a fanged wolf-like snout, and large round horns crowned into its head. His mind overwhelmed with terror, David could make out how the two beings seemed to occupy the exact same location. But his instincts told him they were one and the same. David, it addressed him, still in the little girl's voice. You shouldn't have listened. He fought against his fear with every last ounce of remaining energy, convinced he was somehow being shown a glimpse of hell. It took more strength to just crawl across the floor than he'd ever expended in his life. But somehow he managed to drag himself away from the thing that followed him. You shouldn't have came, it whispered, now just standing just inches away from him, its hot breath on his skin. He gathered the last of his nerve to focus on the wall beyond it. And that's when he saw the wall where he'd clawed desperately at the wood and plaster. In his delirious panic, he had managed to scratch number 7 into the wall, and around the number could make out a faint outline. It was the size and shape of a door. He ran toward it, pushing and pounding, but nothing gave. All the while, the demonic thing was approaching him and taunting him, promising him that there was no escape from this room, from this hell. Falling, his mind breaking, David screamed, his eyes wrenched shut. But when he finally opened them again, the beast was gone. He was alone once again, and there was a door before him with number 7 enchanted into him. He turned the knob and entered what he thought was the next room. Sorry for the cutting off the video short. Due to time, we had to. But don't worry, next week we will have the second part of this story. And a normal video. So yeah.
We'll also have the entire video or story in one video.
Oh, and one more thing. On our last week's episode of Homemade Weapons, Jesse found and murdered probably the last micro dragon that lived in Battleground. So in order for you guys out there to be able to find and identify micro dragons, here's what he knows about them. He knows that they don't grow larger than your hand, that they eat bugs and insects, and hardly attack humans because when it comes to fighting larger opponents, micro dragons will strike an intimidating pose and completely freeze as they can't breathe fire or any element alone. The only way for them to breathe an element is to consume it first. Anyway, they tend to stick in groups of similar color, and if you manage to get a hold of one of these dragons that are only 2 inches long or shorter, consider keeping it as a pet. Any longer, and they're too old. Thank you.
Also, by the way, they make a great snack if you roast them over fire. Bye.